Welcome to the Live Love Ministries podcast, a place where we share thoughts, insights, and experiences from the mission field. I'm Eric.
I'm Brittany.
And I'm Julia.
And we're the Live Love Ministries team. So welcome back to the Live Love Ministries podcast. 5 years ago, we were in the height of COVID. That's when we began the Live Love Ministries podcast. And one of the earliest episodes that we aired, or a series of episodes, it was actually two, was a series of episodes called 5 Things Missionaries Wish You Knew. One of the coolest things about that was 5 years ago today. So it's 5 years ago to the day that we released that series of episodes, 5 Things Missionaries Wish You Knew. And so what I wanted to do, because it was the 5-year anniversary of those series of episodes, is I wanted to release it again. And so we're going to re-release the same episodes. It's going to be 2 episodes again of 5 Things Missionaries Wish You Knew. Now, and you're going to hear this in the conversations that Brittany, Julia, and I have in the podcast, this isn't just what do we think. We spent time, weeks, months, gathering information, interviewing missionaries, talking to missionaries, and compiling a list of 5 things that missionaries wish you knew. Now, of course, we had more time to do that during COVID because things were different, but many of those things are still the same. I thought it would be really, really good. Number one, we've also changed platforms by which the podcast comes out on, and so this one will air more broadly. And so more people will get to hear it. Or maybe you heard it the first time and need to be reminded of it. Or maybe you have missionaries that you pray for. Or missionaries that you've sent out from your church. Or maybe you're a missionary yourself that needs some encouragement. And then you'll hear this and be like, man, I'm not alone. And so we're re-releasing it today. Now, as you listen, remember, this was 5 years ago. So you're going to hear talk about COVID in there. Man, I hadn't talked about COVID in a long time. And when I re-listened to these podcasts, I was like, wow. That was a big part of our life at that point. It's no longer a big part of our life. It did change some things. But for the most part, our life isn't really all that affected by COVID anymore. And so you'll hear that. And so just know that that's a 5-year-old episode. That's why you hear it that way. You'll also hear some times talked about. We've been here 5 years longer than that. So in the podcast, you're going to hear us say something like, well, we've been here 10 years. Now we've been here 15 years. And God has been faithful through all of it, but we have changed a lot in the last 5 years. The ministry has changed a lot in the last 5 years. We have grown here in the United States, and now we have a much larger presence internationally as well, and we do a lot more work overseas and here in the States. We're still active in every community that we talk about in the podcast, or at least allude to in the podcast. We're still active, still serving, still have a continual presence in there, but the ministry has grown. And so there might be a different perspective if you asked us 5 things missionaries wish you knew, if you asked us that right now. And so one of the reasons we're re-releasing it, giving you that background information, but also we're going to do another one at some point, and it's going to be 5 more things missionaries wish you knew. And so it's going to have the 15 years that we've spent here, the time that Julia has spent here, the others on our team, Jordan and Kayla, probably will speak into that one as well, and the time that they've been here, others that serve, the same ones that we talked to last time, and then some more. And so just to kind of prepare yourself for that, listen to this one, know how to better pray for missionaries, support missionaries, or, whatever it may be. Use it, right, to hear from missionaries themselves, but also prepare for a new one that's coming up. 5 more things missionaries wish you knew. So listen closely. I hope you enjoy it. It's going to be 2 episodes. This is the re-release of 5 things missionaries wish you knew from 2020. Now we're re-releasing it today, so enjoy. Now we want to bring you a podcast episode, something that we've thought about and something that we prayed about and something that we've taken notes on for several weeks, if not months. And it's about, that we're going to call the podcast today, 5 Things Missionaries Wish That You Knew. 5 things missionaries wish you knew. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 5 different things, 5 different topics that missionaries either struggle with or deal with, or facts about their life that they wish that others knew. And not just others who hear this podcast, but senders and supporters. Maybe some things they feel like they haven't been able to share with others, with people who support them. And we want to share it so that it is an encouragement that to missionaries, that the words that they're saying are getting out there, but to also strengthen the relationship between sending churches, sending organizations, and missionaries on the field. Our heart's desire would be that missionaries would be stronger, would be able to be healthier, both spiritually, physically, emotionally, and then ultimately stay longer on the mission field, because that's what it's about, right? If a missionary stays longer in the field that they're called, then they are spending more time sharing Jesus. They're spending more time doing what God's called them to do. And so we're going to talk about 5 things that missionaries wish you knew. And do you guys want to say anything about the topic, why it's so important, why you feel like it's so important, before we talk about kind of how we got there?
I mean, I just think basically what you shared is it, but I think a lot of times people have, already preconceived ideas or whatever about missionaries, or sometimes they do have the question and they don't know how to ask it, or they do want to be able to support, but they don't know what exactly they need to do or how to do it. And so just here we go. You don't have to wonder or anything any longer. Like, this is basically a list that we've been able to compile from several people. And so it's like the more people that say the same things, it's obviously these things are important. Right. And so,
yeah, I think it's also hopefully encouraging to other missionaries. Like, I know hearing other people's responses, I was like, oh, yes, like I do struggle with this. Or so hopefully it's encouraging to missionaries, or maybe helpful for people preparing to go on the field. So. Yeah,
good. And so this podcast, when we first began, we wanted to be honest with people. We didn't want to just make another podcast that kind of just scratched the surface of stuff. We wanted to kind of dive into maybe a little bit more difficult topics, or a little bit of things that many people don't talk about. And so we feel like this is one of those, because like Julia said, other missionaries have told us these things, plus these are things that we have wrestled with over the course of our time here. And so we didn't come to all 5 of these conclusions on our own. This started with us listening to the Global Missions podcast and listening to a man who is what did he call himself? A counselor?
Yeah, he's like a counselor to missionaries. Yeah,
and cross-cultural workers. Yeah. So he works in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and he counsels missionaries who are on the field. And so the idea of doing this came through listening to him say, hey, the missionaries that I counsel with, these are some of their struggles. And so then we got the idea, well, why don't we talk to missionaries that we know and see if there is kind of a theme in some of the struggles or some of the things that they wish others knew. And there was. It's really neat. Once we did our research, we figured out there's some pretty consistent themes with missionaries across the board, and we're going to talk about those. And so this isn't just coming from Eric, Brittany, and Julia. This is coming from multiple missionaries in multiple places. And so some missionaries are international. Some have been in Africa and have returned. Some are currently serving in Africa and other countries and other places, and then as well here as in the United States. And so I was adding up last night as we were preparing for the podcast, like how many years experience are spoken into this podcast. So it's beyond Brittany, Julia, and myself. This comes from the missionaries that we talked to combined have over 130 years experience on the mission field. And so this isn't 3 people who have been doing this whatever amount of time coming up with it. This is years, decades, and over a century of mission experience combined into one podcast episode. And so we're trying to give you an accurate picture of what the topic is. And so 5 things missionaries wish you knew. It's a cool topic. And so we're just going to jump right in those. Again, this isn't just coming from us. This is coming from a lot of different people. And the one thing, I'll introduce it, and then we'll each kind of talk about the topics. So we have 5 topics. I'll say what they are, and then the ladies will give their input, and we'll maybe share some personal stories as well along the way from ourselves and others. So number 1, every single missionary that we interviewed, with the exception of maybe one, said this: we wish others knew that missionaries were just real people. That's the way they worded it. That either missionaries are just real people, that missionaries are real people, or that missionaries aren't some superhuman, elevated group of people that have everything figured out, right? That they're not to be put on a pedestal, that they're not to be looked at as different. They are just followers of Jesus who have a desire to make Jesus known where they are called, and they've been obedient to that call. And so they're just real people. What do you guys think about that?
For sure. I think that would be something that, that definitely I would want everyone to know, is that you don't have to look at I can say, like, especially like for our family, don't look at us like we have it all figured out. Or I think personally, like, as a mom, that my kids are going to be perfect, and that our family is perfect. Like, I know that there's pressure in that sometimes. When we go speak at churches, or when churches come here to help us with mission teams, like, you're going to see the realness of everything, right? Yeah. And so our kids still have behavior issues. Our kids,
amen to that.
There's still things that we're just regular people working this out too.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing, just wonderful about us. It's just, this is what God has called us to as our family, and we're being obedient to do it. And so that's basically it. Like, there's nothing else to it other than we're just trying to be obedient to do it. And in that is us learning and figuring things out, and so are our kids. And so please don't ever think, oh, I need to look at them as a model example, or, God must have picked them because they're better than I am. That is not the case at all.
Yeah. Yeah, we depend upon God's grace every day, and in a big way. And so, Julia, thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think just the same thing. Like, I've had people be like, wow, you're so brave. Like, I could never do that. And like, almost like elevate you in a way. And I think about, like, my friends, and like, if you ask any of my best friends, they're just going to be like, yeah, she's a mess. Like, it's not this super Christian type of thing. And I think going along with that, like, missionaries have, drier seasons in their walk with Christ, and there can almost be this pressure to live up to, like, a certain standard of, like, oh, your walk with Christ should always be super great, when there are times that we might not want to read our Bible, like, just like any other Christian. And so I think recognizing that we all go through struggles and drier periods is good too.
Right, yeah. And some of the notes I took as I was reading some people's stories is they have real struggles. Most people that we asked that sent us typed out something and sent it back to us. So they each mentioned that they have real struggles. Like, they're not different because they're in a different location, right? You live in a different part of the world, you still struggle with some of the same things. They might look different and they might fit in a different context, but they still have real struggles. They still have real battles. And if anything, their battles sometimes are intensified because they're away from many of the comforts that other people have. And so they go through that. As Julia mentioned, dry periods. Many people mentioned that. Missionaries suffer with burnout from time to time because of the burden of the needs that they see. And then they pursue that with all they are without taking care of themselves often. Still have family struggles. Missionaries are usually in a different location, and a whole bunch of their families in another part of the world or a part of the country. And that family may struggle with something, and the missionaries drawn back into that as well. They still make mistakes. Oftentimes we go and speak at churches and speak at groups, and we always talk about the good stuff we're doing, which obviously we understand it's by God's grace, but really sometimes we mess up and we make mistakes, and missionaries do that. They have financial struggles, and as Brittany mentioned, kids misbehave still, like, there's just so much pressure sometimes as a missionary to go and take your children, and we have 9 of them, right? And so, and other people, I think everybody that we ask has children. Yeah, they do. And like, our children misbehave sometimes, and so we struggle with disciplining our child in the context of the mission field in which we serve, and And so, and so they are real people. And I think Brittany has a little bit of a story that she wants to share from some missionary families that we interviewed.
Yeah, I was just going to read some of the comments, and then there is a story. So a missionary couple comment that served for years, like
decades.
Yeah, decades. Said one of them also is a missionary kid. So in this comment, he said, "I soon learned that missionaries tend to be placed on a pedestal." And he said the down-to-earth reality is that missionaries are no different than other Christ followers. They are individuals saved from sin by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. They face same spiritual challenges, discouragement, and temptation as others. And he also said geographical location, language learning, and cultural adaptation are not what make one a missionary, but rather being obedient to God's call wherever he leads.
I think that's key.
Yeah.
I think he mentioned the word temptation too in there, like you said. Like sometimes people think, well, missionaries are in a different part of the world. They don't have temptation where they are. We really, really do, and they do. And so
yeah. Another comment from a different couple that have served for about 15 years says, "Be aware that we're not superhuman. We're not a special class of Christians." So basically reiterating, some of the things already said.
Right.
Another one is, we would say that one thing everyone should know about missionaries is that they are regular people called by God to take the gospel to unreached and unengaged people and places. So same thing, there's this common denominator that it's just regular people, nothing special necessarily other than God's call. And then an example story from someone who's a missionary said, that this was kind of goes along with the family struggle, and he was just making the point, like he realized people wished, that they realized that they have real struggles, and his family had real struggles, and basically, some of his comments were like his wife suffered depression, that, and he...
This is after or before getting to the mission field?
This is after being in the mission field.
Yeah.
That I think there was some tendency to be depressed before moving to the mission field, but then it intensified once there.
Right.
And so there's that aspect of it, thinking, which is common because you're leaving everything that to go to a new place and having to adjust. And so there was that depression, and he made the comment, like, there's nothing that I can physically control about that. That it happens, and so people think, well, you're a missionary, you should be able to just get back in check just like that, but there's nothing that he could do about that. And also he gave the example, as his kids grew older and got to be in their teenage years, they really struggled with that, being on the mission field, surrounded by others that maybe were non-Christians, that led into their life as teenagers, and those influences and temptations came to his family. And so he gave the example that his daughter she got pregnant at 15 and then had the baby, and then he had a son who tried to commit suicide later in his teen years. And so these are real things that were happening to his family, and people, it's difficult for him because it was like, well, what am I able to communicate to people without them being judgmental? Right. Because I want them to understand we are real people and we are really going through this. And so he needed support, but at the same time, he didn't know if he would get the support. Right. And so it was like just that struggle of even him as a parent going through these things of like, this is happening to my family and I need this support, but I don't know if I'm going to get it because people think that I should be at this level that I'm not. Yeah. And so just having to like work through some of those things. And he said, this has been basically the toughest time in my life is being here. And it's not that it's bad, like he's not regretting it, but he's just saying it's tough. Yeah. And so these are some issues that, missionaries go through. Right.
And so they are real people. And everybody wanted people to know that. Hey, if your listeners are tuning in and they're paying attention, let them know we're real people and have real struggles. And one of the things that I noted too was a lot of times people will say to us, or I've heard them say to others, wow, you're sacrificing so much to go on the mission field. And every missionary that I've ever met, myself included, we don't see it as sacrifice. Like, we don't feel like we're sacrificing anything. Like, we love Jesus and we love people and we spend our life making Jesus known the best that we possibly can. And because of God's grace, we can continue forward. And because of His mercy, we can continue serving. And so we don't see it as a sacrifice. We're not giving up something that's better to settle for something that's not as good. We believe that we're sold out to the thing that is the greatest treasure on earth and beyond. And so just those kind of thoughts. That missionaries are real people. I appreciate that missionary sharing that story about his family. That's tough. To feel like maybe you don't have the freedom to share with others. Okay. Any other thoughts on that one? Okay, number 2. So the number 1 was missionaries are real people. Number 2, finances are complicated. Like nobody wants to talk about finances with church, but it's even worse to talk about finances when you're a missionary, because the vast majority of missionaries raise support unless they're with a big sending agency that's able to fully fund them, which is not as common as it used to be. Most missionaries raise support, and so it makes finances super complicated, right?
Yes.
You guys want to jump in on that right now?
Well, I'll just say there is so many aspects to just this one point. Mm-hmm. And so
this could be a podcast in it.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say even just in the beginning of this, raising support is difficult. And we've been doing it now for 10 years. Yeah. And, are super thankful, obviously, for the people who do support us. So that it's amazing and it's awesome. But I'm just saying it's also very humbling in the beginning to think through, like, basically everything that I do is going to be based on somebody else supporting me to be able to do it. And so I've tried to get my brain wrapped around, like, not like, oh, I have to raise support and I hate this, but more of like, this is an honor to let people be in on the things that God is doing in our life. And so I've tried to reframe my mind to do that. I'm still a work in progress to do that. Because it's just, like I said, it's just very humbling to think that basically everything that we do, our groceries, toilet paper for coronavirus, whatever, plus the ministry aspect, everything all comes to people supporting it. And so we're very thankful for that. But I'm just being honest about that. It's difficult for us to do that. It's difficult to constantly just be vulnerable and saying, like, basically we need more support to be able to do what we do. Right. It's not necessarily the fun category of missionary work. And so there's that aspect of it that is, in itself. And then, of course, there's other aspects as well that I think we're going to touch on. So,
yeah, I think, like you said, it's like a huge, like, honor to be able to partner with people, but then you also, want to, like, take, other people sending you money, like, very seriously. And so it could cause us to overthink, like, every little purchase and, like, justify everything we do. It could be something as simple as, like, getting coffee, like a normal thing that, we can tend to overthink. But, like, we are normal people that are working, like, a real job. Like, we're working, probably more than 40 hours a week. Definitely way more than 40 hours a week before coronavirus happened. And so, like, if we want to get something, like, little, that shouldn't be such a big deal, but for us, we can sometimes overthink, like, every little purchase because we want to, like, honor people and know that people are sacrificing to, like, support us. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah. Sure. I want to touch on a couple things and then ask you guys to jump in on them because these are huge. Like Julia mentioned, the need to justify everything. And again, let me reiterate, as support raising missionaries, you are so thankful for people partnering with you. We can't do what we do without people's faithfulness and obedience to do that. But we do feel like this need to over-justify everything. Give you an example. Like, you show up at a church to speak, and somebody says, hey, that's a nice shirt you're wearing. And immediately missionaries will say, yeah, I got it on clearance. It was $3 on clearance. Like, why do you feel the need to do that? Or, you make a purchase and you're like, yeah, they were having a sale on it. I got it for dirt cheap or whatever. We over justify everything. Or, you end up having to get a new phone and you have to explain that your old one broke and it shattered and you couldn't use it anymore. And so you had to get this because you don't want people to think that you're being a poor steward. Every missionary we ever talked to has talked about how much of a struggle it was to justify that. And we wrestle with financial decisions. The man I was talking about that counsels people in Cambodia, he says, let people share their family photos or their family vacation or their joy on Facebook and social media. For example, he said these people would come in. He counsels hundreds of people, and missionaries would come in and sit down, and they would say, I feel like I can't even share my family photos on Facebook because the last time I did, now mind you, they're in Cambodia, and so there's palm trees everywhere. He said, we took a family photo saying we did a getaway, and there's some palm trees in the background, and somebody commented, oh, I wish I could suffer for Jesus, in a place where there's palm trees. Man, we take that personal, right, as missionaries, because we are working hard and we're laboring, and we are doing everything we can to make Jesus known. And we take one small family getaway and we share a photo about it, and somebody says, oh, I wish I could suffer for Jesus. Every one of us have heard that comment personally, have we not? And that's tough because that hurts us, because we're like, if you knew how hard it was for me to even give in to want to go to these, to hear, or to know that my family needs this time away to be healthy, both spiritually and emotionally, and just as a family unit. I hope you suffer for Jesus where you are. We're not commenting on you go into a basketball game, or you fishing with your friends, or you're out on the lake having fun, going, oh, you must not be a very serious Christian because you're, that's kind of what it feels like. You're taking advantage of us because you're taking a family trip or whatever.
Right. I want to just share this, for example, because you mentioned vacation, and that's something that most people in America, I would venture to say, go on a vacation at least once a year. And now some people it's multiple times a year. Right. But I would say at least once. And so I remember after we moved here to the mission field and thinking, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to go on vacation again. That was just my thought. I don't really know. And for several years, we did not. It was probably a good 5 years that we didn't do anything. Now, let me add a disclaimer. We would go back to Kentucky to visit our family and to speak at churches. That is not a vacation.
It's good.
It is very good. Family, it is enjoyable. It's something that we need to do, but it is not a vacation, because even there we're working, having to speak at churches and still raise support and still all of that. So I want to just disclaimer that. But I remember that we finally, a couple of years ago, I was just like, we have got to make time to go on a vacation. We have to schedule it in. And even for us, that's difficult too, because we usually have mission teams come in the summer. And so our schedule fills up fast. And so we usually don't even have that time when our kids are out of school to do vacations. But I'm like, I remember a couple years ago, Eric, we're doing this. We are doing this because we struggled. That year was a hard year for us. I knew that we were experiencing burnout, that it was going to get to that point. So it was we're scheduling it. Yeah. And so we did, thankfully. And we went to San Diego. Now, there was definitely that tension of what do we share and what do we not, because we're on the beach, so it looks like a beach vacation.
Now,
San Diego is, 5 hours away?
Yeah, just a drive.
So it's not that far away, but at the same time, we stayed in a campground in our camper, all 11 of us in a camper together. We cooked all of our meals at the camper. Yeah. And so it's we're vacationing, but we're not, just throwing money away, just, going out to eat at all these extravagant restaurants or going to all these nice places. It's this is our we can get away and do this, which was needed, and it was wonderful for us. But at the same time, even in that, we're still focused on how do we do this well. And so I just want to say, there was a definite tension in that. We didn't feel like we were able to share that completely because people would be judgmental. Well, why? You're missionaries. Why do you get to go on vacation? And or the same comment, well, it must be nice to suffer for Jesus in San Diego, you know, but this was needed. And so that's just like a personal, story.
And we share that. So if you're another missionary listening, like, it's okay to take a trip for your family that's healthy. And obviously, yes, we want to be good stewards. And yes, we want to honor the people who have given. But everybody that I know, if I were to sit down, that supports us, or sit down and say, listen, we have a really big need. Our family needs some time off, and they would support that, right? And so, there have been times where we've made purchases where people made fun of us for it because and they realize like how much time and effort we put in to that, to make that happen. And so. I don't know. Any other thoughts? That's a big one. That really is a big one. I feel like that would, because here's the deal: if missionaries can stay healthy, they can stay longer. Again, I want to reiterate that. If missionaries can stay healthy, they can stay longer. If missionaries can take time away, they can stay longer. Most mission organizations require their missionaries to take sabbaticals, to take time off, so that they can unplug, so that they can refuel, they can spend time with the Lord, they can spend time with their family, and come back re-energized. And so that's super important. Even in our small group here, we've talked about how that's super important to take time to unplug. And not that you want to get away from people at all. That has nothing to do with this. You want to be healthy, and you want to be the best that you can be. And so sometimes that looks like taking a little time off or whatever. So finances are complicated, right? Like you just feel the need to overly justify that. And so every missionary that I've ever talked to just about wishes people knew that. Like we really do labor over these decisions. So any other thoughts on those?
Yeah, well, I have this to read from a missionary couple that sent this in. This was one of the things that they wanted to talk about. And if it's okay, I'm just going to read most of his thoughts. So that way I'm not generalizing something that, I take it out of context or anything.
Right.
So he says, for those of us who are missionaries in economically challenged and depressed places, one of the most strange and difficult dynamics we face is that when compared to the people in our home church or culture, we are poor, while compared to the people among whom we live, we are rich. This financial reality is incredibly stressful. We have the same challenges to pay for insurance or save for retirement or for our kids to go to college as any of our supporters. But due to our heart to ministry, most of us take a minimum salary that often makes saving for retirement feel like a luxury. When we are able to visit friends or family, they often spend money on things that seem extravagant to us without necessarily thinking that the same thing is beyond our reach. However, at the very same time, most of the people that we serve see us as being incredibly rich. They literally see us as a bank. I've been asked to serve as a person's savings account, and I've given out many loans to people who work for our organization. But often money can get in the way of genuinely reaching people. People may want to believe the gospel because they see the missionary as a way to get a job or a handout. People often look at your house or your car or your phone, and they can't understand why you won't just give them whatever they need. Preaching and discipling is the fun part of the missionary call, but money is always in the background of everything we do. We want to help people, but we also can't just hand money out, since often that's not the best thing for people, and because we have our own financial obligations.
Super, super true. Super important. I like that. And so that's straight from the mouth of a missionary. And so they're not just complicated, in many of the ways we've mentioned, but they're complicated and with the people that you minister to as well. And so it's a good thought. All right. So number 1 was real people, that missionaries are real people. Number 2, that finances are complicated. And number 3 is that there is a definite difference in short-term and long-term missions. Okay. So and through the interview, through our conversations with people, that's kind of what kept surfacing. There's a definite difference in short-term and long-term missions. Okay. And everybody's going to be like, yeah, I know that. Yeah, I get that. But like short-term missions is hugely important. It's especially for our ministry. It's a big part of what we do. It's what got us all 3 sitting around this table on the mission field. So in no way are we saying that short-term missions aren't important. I mean, most missionaries, their exposure to the mission field was through short-term missions. But anybody that has now become a full-time missionary or a long-term missionary will say, I had no idea what I was getting into, because there's a huge difference between going for a week or 2 weeks or a month and then moving there, living my life there, learning how to do life in a new culture, a new community, a new place, oftentimes a new language, new stories, new everything. Figure things out for my kids, figure out money, figure out groceries, figure out life. Like, that's different than coming as a tourist. And I don't necessarily mean that short-term missionaries come as a tourist, but you don't experience having to figure life out, when you're here for a week, right? Or you're in Africa for a week, or in Asia for a week, because people treat you like you're a tourist, right? Because you're there and then you're going to leave. And so we just wanted to reiterate that and support the missionaries who have said that short-term missions and long-term missions are different. Sure. All right, so let me give you an example of what, some of the things that we've heard. For example, sometimes people who come on a short-term mission trip think, especially if it's their first time coming to the location, they might say, well, I've already been to this place, this place, this place, and this place, so I'm good. Like, I'm perfectly prepared. I'm ready to go because I spent a week here, or I spent a week there. That's not the case, right? Like, missionaries have been there a long time, and they've studied, and they've poured their heart into the places that they are. It's not the same. Two locations, even within the same context, oftentimes are not the same. And so, sometimes as a short-term missionary, you come in thinking, I got it figured out because I've been to X, Y, and Z. But the truth of the matter is, as a short-term missionary, you come in as a learner, right? You should come in as a learner. You should trust the people on the mission field because they have been there. They have studied, and they have given their life to the place that they're serving. Don't assume. Oftentimes, like, people will come in, and we've got this in our notes, show notes too, or not show notes, but in our notes preparing for the podcast. Like, people will come in and say things like, missionaries have said, people will come in and say things like, man, you know what the problem here is? They need to do this. Like, when I was in such and such place, this is what we did, and it worked, and so, this is what they need to do in this place. Like, they come in as an expert. And that oftentimes doesn't even translate into the culture in which they're coming to. And so don't assume you know the needs of the people. These are some of my notes. On-ground missionaries are full-time students of the culture, but are still learning the needs. And so if an on-the-ground missionary is a full-time student of the culture that they're in, and they're still learning, like, somebody who's come for a week isn't going to have all the answers, right? And so they're just different. Even if you've been to the same place more than one time, things change in between times when you come. And so living your life on the mission field, raising a family on the mission field, learning all that other stuff is just vastly different than coming for a few days. Mm-hmm. Those few days are crucial, and please keep going on short-term mission trips, but be a learner. Mm-hmm. and understand that it is entirely different. Okay, you guys give some thoughts on that.
I would just say too, something that just came to me as you were talking about that is, like, I think a lot of times people, specifically because we serve here in the U.S., people think that it's going to just be like anywhere else, mm-hmm. in the U.S. And so it's more like, oh, well, I get to, go to somewhere else and because they see certain parts of the city, they'll see like, like, obviously we have Starbucks everywhere, and we have normal grocery stores and all those kinds of things.
In the cities we do.
Right, in the cities. Yeah. So people think, well, I mean, your life as a missionary can't be that difficult, mm-hmm. because you have all these things that we still do at our home, mm-hmm. which is true. We do have those, but it is completely different when you're with a different culture, like, all the time. And so sometimes I think that gets lost in translation, is like, when you're here short term, you don't see that aspect of it. You still see, oh, we're going to Fry's or Walmart or wherever to get our groceries for our team this week. And so, oh, well, you have all kinds of great food in your grocery store. You don't see, like, the long term of, like, well, that's true. There are those certain things that we do have that we're not having to learn new. But it doesn't mean that life is still easy, or it's like where you are in the United States. Right. You know what I mean? It's like still a different context. And so sometimes you don't get that as when you're here just for the week. You see the the Starbucks, or we go to the ice cream shop, or we go to South Mountain to look out over the Phoenix City, and it's like, this is not what we do every week.
Right, yeah.
This is not, we're doing this because people are specifically here, you're our guest, and we're trying to treat you to a nice week. But this isn't an everyday life. Right. And so you miss that if you're not here long term.
Yeah. And some of the, as we were talking about that, like, because we are in the States, I can't tell you how many people over the years have said, I want to move here. Like, they'll come on a short-term mission trip, and they'll be here, and they'll be like, I'm moving here with you guys. I'm joining your team, you know. Like, and at first, years ago, we were like, oh, that's awesome that you want. Now we don't even we don't give it a second thought, because once they realize oftentimes the struggle of it, or if they go as far as coming back on what they would call a vision trip, or they come back to see things differently than a week where we have a group here, it's like, oh, wait a minute. Like, I thought I was moving to do, and 99.9999% of people who say it never move here. Like, and oftentimes don't even come back.
Point one.
And oftentimes don't even come back. They'll come and have this great, amazing experience, and they're like, this is the best place on earth, and God's calling me here to invest long term, and then we never see them again, right? Because it's just different. And we're not trying to bag on anybody, or because, again, please keep serving that way, but just understand they are different. Like, like some of my best friends I met when they came on short-term mission trips, and so I love them, and they pray for me often, and that's how a lot of times our ministry gets exposure to other churches and communities and places, and man, that's amazing. But just they're just different. Right?
Yeah, I think going along with that, like the short-term mission trip, it really is just like kind of like some of our higher points a lot of the time of the year, where you're like, oh, well, we have VBS, and so like you might see people come to Christ, but then you're here for years, and it's like, oh, like, is God even moving? Like, where are you, God? And so I think being able to recognize that, like, a lot of times short-term mission trips are like bigger events, and you're going to see a lot more people, and obviously there's more people there, so more gospel conversations are being had, but like long term it's a lot different when it's just like a few people and you're doing the same things over and over again. And I was also thinking, like, the emotional impact too. Like, some people be like, yeah, like, I understand, like, mission work is hard, because they're thinking about, like, something that greatly impacted them while they were on a mission trip, but also being able to recognize, for people who are on the field, like, oh, like, this is people's lives every single day. Like, they are dealing with, like, whatever it may be, like somebody trying to commit suicide or whatever, like every week, like something big and dramatic is happening, and so that's going to take like a toll on like long term. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think that brought up a thought where we were listening to that man from Phnom Penh in Cambodia he said he counseled with people, and they said one of the struggles they have is that, like, people will come to serve with them on a short-term mission trip and be like, and so now he's in Cambodia, but they would say, I've been to Haiti, so I got this, and he's like, no, you don't have this, or whatever. It's just different, right? And like Julia said, or people will call and say, yeah, I know the struggle, last week, and we were doing this in our neighborhood, and they're trying to be compassionate, but oftentimes it's just not the same. And so, so Brittany has a little bit. You want to share a little bit about one of the things Missionaries sent?
Yeah, one of the missionary couples just reiterated the point was just to rely on the ground missionaries. And they said, before you're traveling and you're going to be there for your week, it's great to do your research and obviously to pray and learn as much as you can. But then when you get there, you still defer to what the missionaries or even the people that are there are telling you, because they know, because this is their experience. I'm not going to say I'm an expert in the cultures that we are in, but I've been here 10 years, and so I have 10 years of experience of certain things, and so I'm going to be able to tell you, certain aspects that you're just not going to know from research. Or even if you've been here a week before, like Eric was saying earlier, something might have changed in that year or 2 years since you've been here, and so it's always good just to ask questions and be that learner instead of just assuming. And so that was kind of his point. also another thing he said was, don't assume that you know what people need. And that goes to the missionaries and to the people that you're there to serve. You don't assume either what they need. It's good to ask that question, and we do get that a lot, and I'm thankful for that. But a lot of times, personally, as missionaries, we get that question a lot. What do we need? But not so much about the people that we serve. And so he made this point that, there was this wonderful church that had this organ that was really expensive. Like, we're talking thousands of dollars expensive, and they weren't going to use it in their church anymore. And so they wanted to send it to somebody who could use it. And so they sent it to a church on the reservation, thinking that they were doing a wonderful thing. And it was, they were being very generous in that. But the thing is that they didn't ask the question about, was it a need?
Or do you want it?
Or do you even want it, right? And it was just given, like, here it is. And so, it was in the church, and nobody knew how to play it. And they didn't know anybody to get lessons from to learn how to play it. And so it was like, well, now this instrument has been in this church for 15 years probably, and it literally is just sitting there like as a bookshelf almost and collecting dust because nobody knows what to do with it. But in reality, they like to play guitar, and so they could have bought a guitar or whatever, and that met the need that the church could have used. And so here's this $1,000 instrument that could be, given to somebody else that could actually use it, and they could just given that church, the guitar that's a couple $100s instead, and that would have met the need. But it's like, it was just an assumption that we're going to do this, and so that's just like one example of like, just ask. And then if the answer is no, we can't really use that, it's okay. Like, it's not anything personal. You don't have to take it offensively or anything. It's just like, literally, if you give that to us, it may not ever be used. That's the honest answer. And so just be okay with whatever the answer is. If the answer is no, but we could use this instead, then try to do that instead, and just be okay with that.
Right. And so this is just a funny story, and I can share this because I know that the person will never hear it because I don't know who they are. One time we were donated a bunch of stuff, when we were doing ministry, and we began to look through it, and in the donation bag was women's lingerie. And could you imagine us as missionaries saying to the people that we minister to, come get these donations,
posting it on Facebook,
holding it up for people to see or whatever, and or the person actually taking it and somebody asking them, where did you get that from? The missionaries, from the church. It was like women's lingerie. We don't need women's lingerie if you're listening. So it's just a funny story, but anyway, that's kind of one of ours. Like, we better throw this away, before somebody sees it. And so one of the things I think is important to mention is that, like, we were here a few years before we did what we called a community needs assessment. And we went around to the community and asked, what does the community see as a need, as the needs? We had a list, and they weren't necessarily spiritually motivated questions. Like, what are some of the needs of the community? And what we found out was we were meeting some of the needs of the community, but a lot of them we were not. Like, we weren't even addressing what some of the needs that the community. And once we began to address some of those needs, our effectiveness in ministry increased substantially because they had a need, we had the ability to meet it. We just weren't because we didn't know what it was. And so then we were able to address that. I think that's an important thing to mention. All right, stay tuned for part 2 of 5 Things Missionaries Wish You Knew, re-release 2025. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Live Love Ministries podcast.
We hope it was encouraging, made you think, and broadened your understanding of our mission and the mission of making disciples of all nations. You can find out more information about our ministry at www.liveloveministries.org.
If God leads you to partner with us financially through prayer, or if you're interested in bringing a mission team to Arizona or one of our other locations, you can find that information on our website as well. Until next time, keep loving people and keep pointing people to Jesus, and we'll see you then.